Step back, 4-3. Phoenix forced a turnover at halfway. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Clock at 10. Adams the off balance. Oh my goodness. 2 on the clock.
Alrighty, guys, and welcome back to the Basketball Fix podcast. Now, on today's episode, we are going to be doing, as we always do, NBL Supercoach. Now, I'm joined by always Jeremy Dark. How are you going, mate? And welcome back to NBL Supercoach sessions.
Mate, it's more about welcome you back to NBL Supercoach sessions, I think. You sitting on your ass last week, just commenting. You were well enough to sit there and talk shit on the comments on YouTube, but not well enough to join the party. But it was all right. We had Ryan anyway. He did a better job.
Yes, in my defense, last week, recording days was work. Unfortunately, had to work. But yes, obviously, I've had food poisoning on Thursday and Friday. So it's even been just disgusting looking at a phone, especially on that Thursday. Even messaging you guys is disgusting, as it always is anyways. But it was even harder on the weekend. But yes, how have you been though, Matt? Been good?
Mate, been very good. Had an amazing week of Supercoach last week. Have been an amazing week of sport. Jackies are on a 4-0 run. San Francisco have been losing in the NFL. They even got up, so I'm like repping all my shit.
Absolutely flat out. Now, let's get straight into it. Before we do, though, I just want to quickly shout out a few little things off the bat for everyone listening now. As everyone knows, we've got our website, www.thebasketballfix.com. You can see it down there if you're watching on the YouTube now. We've got plenty of stuff on there. We've got our articles. We've got our podcast stuff that gets posted in there as well. But we've also got our fan zone and our forums in that as well. Now, fan zone, we've all been pumping it the last few weeks. But if you guys don't know what that is, it's purely about the fans having a platform to talk with other fans about things that they want to talk about. Now, if you want to talk about your team, another team, a player on your team, a player on another team, something that is annoying you in the NBL, something that's making you happy about the NBL, anything that you want to write is possible on there. It's a free subscription. All you've got to do is sign up, log in, download and get ready. Obviously subscribe to the website there as well. We'll get that out eventually, and make your way into the NBL fan zone as well on the Basketball Fix. We're looking forward to seeing all of you on there, and a new podcast alert as well with Adam Batt and myself called the Perth Cat Chat. Now, brand new Perth Wildcats podcast. I'm from Perth. Adam's from Perth. We've got a little podcast there now talking all things Perth Wildcats. So if you're a Perth Wildcats fan, there's plenty of them who follow the Basketball Fix. That is now the number one Perth Wildcats podcast for you. We're going to be having fans on there as well, other Perth Wildcats fans to come on for segments or episodes to talk about everything. And we're going to try and get a few players on there as well for a couple of segments throughout the season. So plenty going on at the Basketball Fix as always. Now, let's get into Supercoach sessions, Jez. I want you to start off with your rankings and your scores. You had an incredible week, mate, and you've moved into the top 1,000.
Man, big week. 599 points, ranked 69th, which is crazy. You know, you sit there and you watch it and you're seeing it tick over and you're sort of looking at everybody in your own league. You're like, I'm smashing everybody. And then you go and you sort of have a look at, you know, the overall stand, you're like, fuck, 69th. Wasn't that crash hot, really, was it? But still, very, very big, very, very pleased. Now ranked 809th. I went up, almost halved my ranking and went up 748 spots this week. So it was huge. Big mistake. The big hit for me was Rocco Zakarski only scoring 2 points. If we would have traded him out and had Almanza still in my team, I would have been fighting for that top spot, actually. So it's the small margins, but still very, very pleased. You also had an okay week, but a bit of disappointment.
A bit of disappointment, which we'll touch on very, very soon. But I finished the week on 523 points, which I'm pretty happy with, to be honest with you. It was, I think, about par or maybe just over par. I think 500 was about the par score this week. And I am currently ranked 1,639. So moved up 354 spots. So relatively happy with that. Again, moving in the right direction. These next couple of weeks coming up are going to be super important before majority of the NBL teams go on double game weeks. But I just want to give a quick shout out as well to somebody in the Basketball Fix league as well. I also work with this guy, Kieran. He scored an incredible 632 and finished sixth for the round. So he had a massive breakout sort of week. He's been struggling all year. His current rank is at 2,795. So the big fella has gone absolutely berserk there with an incredible score. But let's get into the reactions from last week, mate. Now, I'm going to kick us off. Obviously, good performers. I get my boy. We both had him in our team. We both captained this guy. Bryce Cotton, 107 points in an absolute stellar week once again. Had 101 points last week. I don't reckon there'd be any person who's played NBL Supercoach, I'm talking about players, who would have gone back-to-back 100 weeks. That is just unheard of. Maybe back in the day when some teams did play 3 games in one round. I know Tajir McCall back in the day had a 115, I think it was, over a round. But again, that's a 3-game average there compared to the 2-game averages that Bryce has been putting up. But he's been a man on a mission for the Perth Wildcats, and I'm looking forward to touching and breaking down his performances on the Perth Catch App and also be on the buzzer over the next couple of weeks as well. But another guy for me as well was Tyrell Harrison. Now, I think this guy through the universe gave me food poisoning, if I'm being honest with you boys, because I remember last week I said, oh, he'll come back. He only had food poisoning. I was in the comments with you guys when you guys were recording NBL Supercoach sessions, and we all were talking about him in the comments. I think a Flying Toilet actually mentioned him as a genuine captain option, and he was proven well and truly right as well. 76 points, which was massive. That first game in particular, I think it was 18 points and 16 rebounds, if I'm not mistaken. So just massive numbers, and that's what he's going to do for this team, and that's what he needs to do for this team, because he's having to carry a massive load with, like you mentioned there, obviously Rocco Zakarski, which we'll both touch on very shortly in our poor performance, but he is having to weather the load for the Brisbane Bullets. But Jeremy, yourself, mate, you've got a couple of some good performers, obviously, for that really, really impressive score.
Yeah, well, I think Jack White was the most traded in person last week. I think everybody needed to have him. That was the call. The headline was, is Jack White a must-have? And he certainly proved to be with 80 points. He just it was evenly spread over 2 games. And the funny sort of thing is I think both of those games, Jack White starts off a little bit quiet and you get a little bit scared and you get a little bit nervous, and then he just explodes in the second half, and then he gets you double-double, and then it's all pretty again. So definitely, big performance for Jack White, and definitely proved to be that must-have. And then I took a little risk or a different play, bringing in Sam Wardenberg into my team because they were only on the single. So it was a big call, but it certainly paid off as well. He scored 78 points. The same again, very, very evenly spread over the 2 performances, which is what you want. You know you're going to get consistency, and when you're bringing in players like that, you just you don't want these erratic scores of from 20 and then 60 or 20 and 40. It's perfect to have them evenly spread over there, getting around 30 and between 35 and 45. So, and also double machine now. I think when Cairns go into their patch of doubles, he's going to be up there as one of the must-haves going through that period as well, I think, because it just gives you that little bit of variety, so you're not overloading on players from the same team. So, and then sorry, just had to have a bit of a cough there. Good. But I think we also got to give credit. None of us had him in our team. We had someone in the chat last week saying, is it worth bringing in Kendrick Davis this week, even though he is on a single game week? And I gave that a big fat no. Definitely not worth it. Only playing 1 week. Don't know how he's going to go. He scored 66 points. I think it was like the 6th or 7th highest score of the whole round, and he was on a single. So massive. So I say sorry and apologize for that shitty advice last week. You definitely could have brought Kendrick Davis in, and it's going to be... Now it's a bit tough. I think in the early trades this week already, he's one of the most traded in players, or players that I don't have in my team, so which I've noticed, which is huge because he's got a break even of like 14 going into a single game week. So he's definitely going to go up in price, and he could be the most expensive player in Supercoach as well. So, do you bring him in this week? Do you bring him in next week?
Oh, I guess that's the question on everyone's mind. Sorry, I'm absolutely sweating up a bit of a storm here for everyone watching on the YouTube. It is absolutely bloody warm over here in Perth, and with not much fan usage going on, it's very tough. But that's going to be the question for everyone, I think, this week is it too early to bring in guys like Montrezl Harrell and Kendrick Davis? Obviously, a single game week this week, and then they go on a run of 2 double game weeks over the next 2 weeks. But what they're doing on singles is just unheard of, realistically. They're putting up massive double-doubles on the weekend. Davis had 37 and 11 as his stat line, had 66 fantasy points. And we've seen Montrezl Harrell, as you had him a couple of weeks ago, probably a month ago now, I'd say, had a 67 on a single. So these guys can put up monster numbers and huge statistics that are unmatched, essentially, in the NBL. But we will touch on that a little bit later because I'm sure there are going to be a couple of questions on the YouTube based around that. But let's get into the poor performer, mate. Now, I'm going to give him to you. And now I want to obviously touch on this a little bit. So he had 2 points for the round, had a -3 in the second round. Now, it's obviously Rocco Zikarsky has been very disappointing for us. But what is going on with Rocco? Because I'm not sure if you watch their games completely or if you've seen little bits of it, but there seems to be something missing with Rocco's game right now.
Yeah, well, I think even from the start, I flagged it in one of our shows, if it was Beyond the Buzzer or maybe it was Supercoach, where it just doesn't feel like he has that same sort of energy and he's sort of struggling. I think struggling mostly on the defensive side of the ball, which means he's not getting time. He's playing, just an average of 10 minutes. And I think after last season, when he showed all that potential, I think everyone, and it being a draft year for Rocco, we expected to see more of him, more minutes. A little bit like what's happening with Almanzar or even Lopez, Malik Lewis, like some of these young next stars are getting a heap of time. But it's just not happening for Rocco. And I feel it's the defensive effort. It feels like he's huffing and puffing a little bit, which makes it tough. He's not able to get back and get set in defense quick enough. And that's seeing him get reduced minutes. So, and it's also then, I guess when he's on offense, he's a little bit sluggish and he's missing some shots. And it's a bit of a shame because he certainly has the potential, and probably you can almost say it's the most important year of his life when it comes to basketball because it could really sort of change everything for him. But he's just not quite getting there at the moment. And especially with Josh Bannon out, you would have expected those minutes to go up, but Harrison is just dominating and taking it all, and you just can't have Harrison off the court.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird one over there in Brisbane because, Rocco's got a really, really high ceiling, I think, obviously, and that's what everyone's discussed. But I think I'm actually starting to get a little bit over the hype of Rocco Zikarsky, and that might be harsh in a sense, but I think he's been overhyped and pushed a little bit further because obviously he's an Australian in the NBL, and that's what they want to see. They want to see these young kids skipping the college route and making sure they're staying, obviously, in the NBL. But this whole discussion is probably a discussion for Beyond the Buzzer, but he just looks, like you've said, sluggish. He looks really, really slow. Obviously, he hasn't got the size just yet. And that as a 7'3" center, it's going to be tough if you haven't got size because you're not really agile. You're not really, showing much on the offensive end as well. I think his most important things that he needs to start to develop is that shot from the mid-range. Just the mid-range alone. Don't worry about the three-point shot just yet. Just a nice little floater or mid-range jumper, which can give you some easy points as well to get you into the game. But yeah, it looks like he's honestly just running laps up and down the court every single time. And for Supercoach, it's definitely frustrating as well for a guy who most people had him as a lock at the start of the season because of his price point.
Yeah.
And well, realistically, he hasn't really made a lot of money, and he's probably going to start to lose a little bit of money that he has made over the season very, very shortly. But let's get into the schedulizer now, mate. Now, this is where it really starts to get important. There are a few teams here who have a really good run. We've also got a couple of teams who are on their last double game week as well. So Brisbane are the major winner. So they go in now with 7 double game weeks in a row, obviously last week as well. So you can count it as an 8-week stretch where they play double game weeks. So that's really, really good for Keandre Cook, Bateman, Prather, Tyrell Harrison, all those guys that we have been touching on over the last couple of weeks. Now, Melbourne United play their last double this week. Now, they've had an incredible run. I think they go on a 2-game single run, and then they're back on a short little double run as well. So a guy like Jack White, you're most likely trading out. But a couple of these other guys, you could potentially hold on to them. If you've got guys like myself, like Matthew Dellavedova, Shea Illy, they're guys who are probably okay to sit on the bench and obviously go from there. So they've got 3 single games after this, I should say. Sorry, thank you, Ryan. The New Zealand Breakers, they've got 2 more double game weeks. including this week. Then they go on a single, and then they're back on 4 double game weeks as well. So again, you can hold on to guys like Parker Jackson, Cartwright, Sam Meninga. Still got really, really good runs coming up. And obviously they've been scoring relatively well. And it's going to be interesting to see how they go further on. And the last team with a double game week is Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. They've only got the single double game week this week. Then they play 2 single game weeks, and then they're on a sort of short run of double game weeks as well. So 4 teams on the double, bit of information there to process. Brisbane, Melbourne United, New Zealand, and Southeast Melbourne Phoenix are the teams that we're looking to bring in. But what about the single game weeks, mate? Because there are a couple of teams that you're going to mention here who have got some pretty good schedules coming up.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really crucial week. I think depending on how obviously how it goes and how these players score, but it's you can look at it sort of 2 different ways. You can be trying to load up and make sure you've got as many players on your team to score the most amount of points this week. But because it is this little shift now from some teams that have been on doubles, say like Perth and Melbourne, and then they're shifting to having no doubles, we've all been loading up on those players, and all of a sudden you're going to get stuck. So I think both of us, as we'll get into when we start talking about our trades, but I think you can really focus on maybe planning for the next phase and sort of this middle run before everybody goes on all the double game weeks, because you've got, like we said, Adelaide have a single this week, but then they've got 2 doubles, then they've got a single, and then they're on 4 doubles. And then you've also got the Illawarra Hawks, who have been haven't even been in the match until after the first sort of few rounds, and now they're going to go on a 5 double game week stretch. So somewhere there, if you want to make sure that your squad is deep enough and you've got enough double game week players next week, it might be time to take a little bit of a hit on your total score this week and make sure that you're starting to prepare for next week and the week after, because you can get stuck if you're loading up just with, obviously if you've got heaps of Brisbane players, you're fine, but your New Zealand players next week are still going to be valid, but then not the week after. So I think you've got to start to prepare a little bit. I've sort of found myself in 2 minds. Once again, you sort of get a little bit horny because you get one good score and then you just want to go all gangbusters and make sure that you're staying at the top and you're hitting. But with what repercussions later is the question, because all of a sudden in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, you don't have enough of these double game week players in your team. So it's the risk you want to take. But like you said, you could load up with some Adelaide players, certain players that are going to score really, really big on single game weeks, and then prepare yourself so you've still got enough trades to bring in enough players over the next couple of weeks to be full stocked for that little run there.
Yeah, and I think like an important thing as well to think about is there is a certain point in the season where your bench points aren't as important or as crucial. Like if you're coming down to, picking Montrezl Harrell, Kendrick Davis, for example, over the next 7 weeks, you're picking that player up over picking 2 okay players, mid-range players who may score you, 50 to 60, or can obviously have the game or 2 there where they score you 20 to 30 over a double game week. So I think this is where the really important stages come out, where we see late in the season where most people will shy away from their benches, and it's all about having the top players and top scorers whilst having a decent bench on the sidelines as well to obviously tick some points over. So, if you're getting 30 to 40 points on a double game week on everyone on your bench, you're pretty happy with that, knowing that you've probably got Montrezl Harrell, Kendrick Davis, Bryce Cotton, Parker Jackson, Cartwright, all of these guys floating through your team as well. So it's going to be super, super interesting to see some of these teams, because whilst there is a lot of teams, the majority of the teams are going on double game weeks, I think this is where we may start to see a few changes in everyone's teams, and we will start to see some unique teams as well. And this is the time of the year where teams will start to fly up the rankings, and we'll see some drastic, I think, changes in the rankings as well. So maybe it's getting to that point now where it's starting to take a few risks. But we are going to go to a quick little break here, and after the break, we're going to reveal my team quickly and break down some of my early trade thoughts. Alrighty, so we're going to get our teams up, and I'm going to kick us off straight away with obviously what my team is looking like. So obviously last week I scored 523 points last week. Yes, there it is. Just make sure I got that one right. And now obviously this week is a bit of an interesting one, because it's going to be a tough call between a couple of guys. So as you currently see, my current trades are Christian Doolittle and Ben Henschel to Casey Prather and Darius Days. Now, that leaves me currently with $58,000 remaining. But I'm not set on this just yet. So I'm tossing up between Darius Days and Mason Peatling. So Mason Peatling's currently got a break-even of -12. He's currently priced at 111, and I think he's actually taken Darius Days' role. Now, Days was incredible against the Perth Wildcats, but so was everyone, to be honest with you. They put up 121 points as a team. They had players left, right, and centre. So is that 36 a reflection of a good game? Because he has been pretty poor over the last month or so, I'd say. Or is that what we're going to see, obviously, over the next couple of weeks? That is my biggest question there with Darius Days. And it's something that I'm a little bit worried about. So we will see who I do go with in the end. But Casey Prather is a lock in my team. I think when it comes down to it, Josh Bannon is rumoured to be back this week, apparently. Not 100% set in stone, but if he's back, I think James Bateman is the guy, unfortunately, who will go back to the bench and make way for Josh Bannon, unless they decide to bring Josh Bannon off the bench and obviously, play Bateman, Cook, and Prather still at the 1, 2, and 3. But it's going to be very, very interesting because obviously Casey Prather has been an absolute heater last week, 81 points. Again, I'm spewing out to trade him out of my team a couple of weeks ago as well. I pretty much held him for the entire season, but a break-even of 39, projected score of 64 this week. I'm looking forward to bringing that into my team and obviously making, one, a little bit of cash, and two, obviously a player who's going to have a really nice run over the next couple of months. But the overall structure of my team, I'm pretty happy with. Obviously, I'd like to get rid of Rocco Zikarsky, and I'd also like to get rid of Keanu Rasmussen. But he was okay last week, 29 over 2 games. I think his role will still somewhat be there this week with Dejan Vasiljevic still out. It looked like Mike Wells was still okay having him in the team. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see, obviously, what he does over the next couple of weeks. He's still got a break-even of 1, so a bit of a chance to make some cash if he gets out in the court in the single game week. But what are your thoughts, Jez? How's my team looking? I know we've probably got somewhat of a similar team to each other, but yeah, what are your early thoughts?
Yeah, I think we do. At least our starters are they're similar. We both on the same page, I think, of preparing a little bit for the next few rounds by bringing in some Illawarra players, or even you've even got an Adelaide player, so you're looking pretty good for those to fill those sort of important or not so important bench spots, however you want to look at that. But I'm still also quite surprised because having Matthew Dellavedova and Parker Jackson Cartwright as your guards, it's been, I think both of those guys, I sort of even felt Delhi, I was quite surprised, scored 68, because when you watching some of those games, Delhi sort of seemed to be struggling a little bit, but then he just goes into these patches where he just smashes points. He just gets hot in certain periods and just absolutely smashes. So I think that's sort of really, really key. But if I can phase the question, what are you looking to do next week? What players are you then going? How are you preparing for that for the next round? What players do you think are on the chopping block, and who are you looking to pick up next week?
Yeah, so Matthew Dellavedova will make way from my team, and that is going to be a double, 1 downgrade, 1 upgrade. So Kendrick Davis will be the guy that I target next week. So he's going to be priced at around $500K. Now, this is where the question comes into it of obviously do I go Darius Days? Because if I bring in Mason Peatling, it will leave me for next week $183,000, in which will make the Matthew Dellavedova trade even more juicy. So it's going to look like Jack White and Matthew Dellavedova are out next week. For Kendrick Davis and somebody else are priced at about $300K or about $275K. So there's still a lot of serviceable players. It could be, a guy like James Bateman, maybe, if I shuffle a few things around. But my whole goal is to hold Cotton through these singles. He's still really, really well poised at a break even. I think personally you're stupid if you're going from Bryce Cotton to Kendrick Davis. That's just my opinion, to be honest with you. The way Bryce is playing right now, he's going to score still 40 to 45. And with a game against Cairns this week, there's a chance he goes out and scores 60 to 70 points again. So, that is my sort of early plans. Again, it's always nice having these plans.
Is that 60 or 70 points actually on the court, or 60 or 70 point fantasy points?
on the court. So we're looking at 100.
Yeah.
We're looking at about 100 game week. So, but yeah, that's sort of my trades. Delhi's last week, this week, he's been inconsistent. I think he's finding his groove though. He looked very attacking in the game against Brisbane. I think he had 16, 18 points, about 6 assists as well. So I just love to see him get those double tick overs as well. It'd just be so much nicer. But yeah, that is my early sort of trade thoughts there. So hopefully, fingers crossed, Jack White makes me a little bit more money. Matthew Dellavedova makes me a nice amount of cash. And I'm looking at a really good upgrade to Kendrick Davis.
What is Delhi's break even?
So Delhi's break even currently is 36. So once again, if he goes out and gives me another 60, for example, even just 50, we're looking at making another 20 to 30K. So that's a relatively, point where he can make a bit more money. And obviously, again, it makes that Kendrick Davis trade that little bit more easier as well. All right, though, Jeremy, enough of talking about my darn team. Let's get into one of the hottest teams in NBL Supercoach. Your team, mate. There it is. Wow, looking nice. Matt Hurt. That is an interesting addition.
Yes, it is. I can start it off. I've got Parker Jackson Cartwright. I have Keandre Cook as my guards starting. Tyrell Harrison, of course, in the centers. Jack White, and yes, you said it, brought in Matt Hurt this week. Then on the bench, I have also brought in Darius Days at the moment, but was in exactly the same mind frame to you. Just haven't crunched the numbers yet for next week to see what I want to do there, because I was also looking at Peatling purely because of that negative break even that he has. I think he was negative 12 break even. If I just gonna pull that up so we know. But anyway, it's gonna make a heap. Yeah, gonna make a heap of cash at least. Even if he scores sort of 20 points, you should sort of see a pretty 20, 30,000 increase there, as long as he does get minutes. That's the biggest question. Still carrying Sam Menenga, also been a little bit of a disappointment. Got Zakarski, also, absolutely struggling. And then, Cotton and Glover I have on my bench as guards. So, the big call for me, is obviously what to do with Darius Days and Peatling. And I've brought in Matt Hurt because I just think he's a little bit on the way up. He had a little bit of a quiet patch there, and now he's had a couple of fairly decent scores with an average score in the middle. I think he had 2 that were over 30, and then he's had like a 20 or something there in the middle of those. But I think coming up this week against Brisbane and Melbourne, he has scored extremely well this year. So he scored 34 last time he played Brisbane, and when he's played Melbourne, he scored 40 and 32. So I think there is a really good chance, even though Tyrell Harrison has been a beast, when you're sort of looking at players that have played, like obviously Jack White went up against Harrison in Brisbane last week and scored over 40. I think these types of, centre forwards that can get in and get rebounds, your rebounders and scorers, if they can just get a little bit hot with the ball, they can have some really big games against Brisbane. So, and same with Melbourne at the moment, because Melbourne are leaking points like nobody's business. They've got to be, I know that they're leaking over 100 points on average over their past 6 games. So they must be one of the worst defensive teams in that aspect at the moment, besides I think Brisbane, because Brisbane are also leaking, and even Perth. So the whole league is almost leaking points. But for Melbourne, I think it's really, really unlike them. I think we've been used to Melbourne being one of the best defensive teams in the league and being really tight, but they've just gone on the attack. I think when Chris Goulding started to score heaps, they were just letting it go a little bit, but it's held, leaking all these points. So anyway, beside the point, I think Matt Hurt definitely has a chance, and it is a little bit of a pod. I think it's a calculated risk, I would like to say, because I don't think it can go really bad, but I think there's a really good chance that he could score sort of, 80, 85 points, somewhere around that over his double game week. And if that happens, then he's definitely going to be a point of difference, and hopefully someone like Prather that everybody else is bringing in maybe bombs a little bit. So that's sort of my mindset there of why I brought in Matt Hurt instead of chasing someone like Casey Prather that's been scoring well, last week, the week before a little bit. So That's the idea behind that. But yeah, I'm looking in next week. Sort of why I was asking, I was just trying to get into your brain about what you're looking at next week, is because I want to bring in Montrezl Harrell, and if I sell, I'm not sure if you want to keep. I don't know if I'm in the same mind frame of keeping Cotton. I'm undecided about that right now. I think this week, obviously, but next week, if the money's there and the price is right, I think upgrading Cotton to Kendrick Davis and also bringing in Montrezl Harrell could be the play for me, because I do have the cash. I've still got 76,200 in the bank. And if I did that, I would have enough money, I'm pretty sure, to bring in them. If not, once I punch the numbers later on in the week, it might be that downgrade of Darius Days to Peatling to free up some cash and also earn a little bit of cash.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's the way to go. Now, I've just got Mason Peatling's stats up here on the screen, just so we can let everyone know. So over his last 3 games, and this is where he's seen the increase in 1 minutes and opportunity. So he started all 3 of these games. He scored 17, 18, and 21. Now, let's just say he hits his projected score, which is 14. He will then rise $27,200 this week. So that is a massive jump in, obviously, cash and obviously everything else that comes with it. So I think he's a safer option in terms of if you're wanting cash, 100%. And you're probably not going to lose too many points than having Darius Days in the team, to be honest with you. So I don't know. I think the more I talk about it, I'm leaning towards it even more. Now, before we move on, I just want to give a couple of shout-outs to people in the chat right now. A Flying Toilet, how are we going, mate? Welcome back to the show. Crafty Fat Boy as well, how are we going? Matt's asked a few questions, which we will touch on very, very shortly. He's got a couple of Perth Wildcats related questions, so I'm looking forward to touching on them at the end of the show. But now it is time for, my friend, for you to do your segment, one of my favourites every time we get onto this. Darks Doubles, what have you got?
This is probably the hardest week in a long time, I reckon. Wow, that was really awesome. I reckon this is tough. I reckon. Because I think there's a lot of potential big scores, and I think it depends how safe you want to go. If you want to just stay consistent, or if you want to take some risks. But like listing off the ones there, all in my team, of course, I'm sort of looking at Josh just adding his own ad-lib notes in Dark's doubles right now. But yeah, definitely I'm looking at Jack White. I currently have Jack White set as my captain. So we'll start off there. He scored 49 against Illawarra earlier this year, but then he scored just 19 against Southeast Melbourne. But I'm wondering if that was the game where he did hurt himself. I know he ended up walking out of a game a little bit earlier, but
I'll have a quick look.
Yeah, just so we know there. But yeah, definitely Illawarra, we saw on the weekend, they also can leak a fair few points. So I think Jack White is definitely an option. He goes hard anyway. He's a big chance for your double-double. Then the next guy, going into the centres, Tyrell Harrison has been absolutely going gangbusters. But the worry with Harrison is the consistency a little bit, because he's also had some shockers as we go through. When they play Southeast Melbourne and they play Sydney, against Southeast Melbourne, he scored a 41 and a 29 in his last 2 against them, the 41 being the latest this year. And then against Sydney, he scored 29 this year and only 11 in the game prior. So, but I think we've seen with Tyrell Harrison, I'm a little bit worried. I have some concerns about Brisbane and their performances. So I'm not as red hot on Brisbane players maybe as you are. So that is a big red flag for me. And then there's PJC. New Zealand have been struggling, but he's still been sort of ticking away. He's also goes quiet in some games. They shut him down and then he goes off. So it's almost like, and it sounds crazy to say, but he could be the wild card captain of this week, because I think people think that he's gone a little bit off and he could all of a sudden have some really, really big games. They go up against Tasmania and Adelaide. He has scored incredibly well against both of those teams in his last 2. He scored 36 against Tasmania and a 41. and against Adelaide, he scored a 43 and a 46. So some of these are over 2-year spans, but some of them are, just this year. So, but I think he could definitely be. It sort of feels like everyone's gone off him because Bryce Cotton has just been going so massive, and everyone's like, okay, well, what's going on with PJC? And you've got him obviously locked into your team because they have so many doubles, but looking for captaincy elsewhere. So I think he could be a risk because it's Parker Jackson Cartwright. He could score, also score 250s and get you 100 points in a round. So. He's definitely there. And then I also throw in Matt Hurt because I obviously have a lot of belief in him if I've brought him in, and I've gone through the reasons why I like Matt Hurt this week. And then Josh, you're thinking maybe Bryce Cotton on a single game week as captain or what?
Oh, you just never know, do you, mate? To be honest with you, I think it's a genuine thing to think about in the form that he's in. But yeah, I like all those options. I'd still have Parker Jackson Cartwright number one out of the list that you've got here. Jack White number two. It's a toss-up between Harrison and Hurt. But one guy I'm going to throw to you in a second. I just want to quickly touch on Parker just quickly. But the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers have decided to go with Sean McDonald as that opposing point guard. Now, whilst I think Shawnee's a great point guard, he's not the best defender when it comes to defending small guards. And then obviously you're going to, the sort of 1-2 punch essentially there is with Jordan Crawford, who again is a very small guard who has had troubles in the past with Parker Jackson Cartwright. So again, though, Scott Roth has had a week now to think about what he's going to do to stop Parker Jackson Cartwright. That always scares the living daylights out of me because he is one of the best defensive strategic coaches in the NBL. And that will worry me. But I think the Adelaide game is a really good opportunity for him as well to potentially score massive points. We could be looking at another double-double performance for him as well because they're going to leak points. You saw on the weekend, Kendrick Davis was happy to go one-on-one with Bryce and see who could score the most points and who could drag their team across the line. So, but the other guy that I want to bring into the conversation, and I think it's a genuine conversation as well, and that's Casey Prather as a captain. So I know he's obviously been heavily brought in this week, and you just got to look back to his form over the last sort of 5 games. So, you can even go back a little bit further. He's had a pretty consistent season. So let's just look at the last 5 games, for example. So round 8, 29 points against Melbourne United. He then had a 28 against the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers, a 40 against the Perth Wildcats, 42 against Adelaide 36ers, 39 against Melbourne United. Now, when I look at South East Northern Phoenix and the Sydney Kings, I see weaknesses both at those guard position, at those sort of forward positions. So, he's probably going to match up on South East Northern Phoenix on a guy like maybe Malik Lewis, who I think he's too fast with when it comes to trying to beat him down the paint personally. Or he comes down to a Joe Wieskamp, for example, as well, who is just, again, I think, just too strong. You're starting to see him really get back into that form where he was one of the top players in the NBL. I think his points per game average now is the second highest it's ever been in his career. So he's on an historic tear right now in terms of NBL history. And the Sydney Kings as well have some worries, I think, personally. He's going to match up against Alex Tui, who's been pretty good. And obviously Kawat Noy as well. So I think there's gaps in the market there for Casey Prather to really exploit these two teams. He's played South East Northern Phoenix this year. He had a 32. He's played the Sydney Kings this season as well, had a 27. And they were back in rounds 3 and 4. So, again, it's probably not a genuine massive captain's option. He does need to score heavy points for him to have huge Supercoach scores because he does rely on his points. But we will see for sure, mate. What are your thoughts on that quickly?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not as hot on Brisbane as you are. We'll dive into it a little bit deeper this week on our Beyond the Buzzer episode. But I just think, they're so reliant on scoring a lot and they're so reliant on shooting at a high percentage. So they've been extremely accurate over last weekend. It's not what's the word? It's not maintainable, I think is the best way to say it, because they're, currently over last weekend, they shot at 60% from the field as a team. I don't see them scoring that much, as much as they have been over the last few weeks and holding that field goal percentage, because we love the law of averages, and the law of averages says you cannot shoot at 60% from the field for too long in the NBL. It does not happen. And especially because they've been shooting so well from 3. Brisbane are now the best team in the NBL from 3, but I just don't see it holding as long as it has. They've played a different style, and it's only a matter of time before teams start to work out what they need to do to shut down these guards. Brisbane sort of shifted from, like we said earlier, moving everything down low. It was all through Harrison. Now they're starting to get all this great production from their guards, and teams are going to start to work it out and make it more difficult for them to shoot. And we'll see this field goal percentage go down, which will see these Supercoach scores go down as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, but I don't know. Personally, I think at the end of the day, the NBL's in, I think, nearly the most exciting sort of era it has been over the last couple of weeks. There is players that are just unstoppable right now. We haven't seen an era in which it's been so dominant for such a long period of time. And, this is the best the NBL has ever been. And call me young, I'll call you old if you say otherwise, because this has the most talent in the NBL history, I think, as well. So it's going to be a really interesting time for the Brisbane Bullets, but we've got a couple of questions here to finish it off. Now, Matt's asked, and this is the guy who I said is a genuine Perth Wildcat supporter. He's asked, what's the go with Bryce Cotton? Does he sign for the Wildcats or does he go to the NBA next year? Now, this is more of a question, I think, for the Perth Cat Chat. I'm going to quickly answer it here, Matt, but subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, because on Monday's episode, this is going to be a massive talking point on the Perth Cat Chat. For me personally, I don't see him going back to the NBA. I don't care what money gets thrown his way. He will not go back to the NBA. He will play in the NBL next season. He set his life up in Australia. Now, he set his life up in Perth right now, but again, it doesn't take much to move, and it's not much of a culture shock to move from Perth to Sydney or Perth to Melbourne. I don't think that's off the cards at all. I think the Perth Wildcats have really got to assert themselves over the next couple of weeks. They've got to really nail down a few things to get his signature as well. So I'll break that down a lot more, Matt, to be honest with you, on the next couple of episodes of Cat Chat. But I think the ball's in the Perth Wildcats' court, and if he leaves, it will be because the Perth Wildcats don't do the right thing by him. So I saw a comment on one of the Facebook group chats, Mark Arena should be marching his way over with Danny Mills to Bryce Cotton's house with a blank cheque over Christmas. I'm 100% on the same belief of that. Pay that man whatever he wants to be paid. I know it's not all about money. He wants to win as well, but monetary value, staying at home where you have been for the last 8-9 years now, will really help your case. Also, Matt, have you got anything to add that, Jez, or?
No, I just don't see him leaving. And all the reports say, there was a quote this week from Bryce himself saying it's not about money, it's about lifestyle and family and mental health and all of that. So I think we're pretty safe that he's staying in Australia. Yeah, he loves it here. I don't see him leaving. And I think it'll be a big call if he was even to leave Perth, to be honest.
100%. Yeah, he's genuinely made a life for himself over here. He's got a kid over here now. His missus is over here. Everything's all set over here for the Perth Wildcats. So I think it'll be very hard to see him leave. And we have seen stranger things, though, but he's a very loyal man for sure. But Matt's also asked as well on Keanu Pinder. So I've spoken to a few people about this. He was very close to playing on the game against Adelaide 36ers on Sunday. But essentially they just said, we need you for the back end of the season. You need a rest, get over this illness completely, and come back next week. I think personally they've ruled him out a little bit too quick. They probably should have just ruled him out for Friday night's game. Then when Doolittle went down, I think it was important they actually brought him back into the team, to be honest with you. But at the end of the day, the Wildcats still won that game. So I don't think it caused them too much of a headache anyways. Just a couple of comments here as well. Crafty Fat Boy said, Rocco looked really good playing for Australia. Thought he was going to be on fire, but he's absolutely ice cold, 100%. Matt's also touched on Doolittle being injured. That absolutely ruined my week, as I mentioned earlier. That was just a disappointing thing, not even just as a Supercoach pundit, obviously for a Perth Wildcat supporter. Seeing him go down in the first minute was absolutely horrifying, and it did cost us late in that game against the Illawarra Hawks. And Pinder is dead to me by a Crafty Fat Boy as well. So that's pretty hectic, to be honest with you, but we'll leave that one and we'll move on from that one as well. An NBL injury list update would be good. Yeah, this is one thing that's been touched on from the NBL for plenty of years. I just think it needs to be updated almost daily or every second day, because you get no stats, no nothing.
It's outrageous that you can have a professional league, and then even with how much they're all pushing Supercoach, talking about Supercoach, even in the commentary, and you're not getting any sort of updates or injury updates until Thursday. And then you've got to be following the right Twitter accounts to even get that happening. You go onto the NBL website and they can write an article about a player being injured and being out for the weekend, but haven't updated it on the actual injury list page that you go in and check. There's still like updates from months ago that are not even relevant almost anymore. It's incredible. Like, Supercoach isn't everything, but it's massive. Fantasy sports is huge. Look what it's done to the whole of America. It's pretty much fantasy sports brought gambling into every state in America, and there's so many people in Australia following it. It becomes the highlight. It's why people follow their fantasy team a lot before they even follow a real team. So if you want it to be a priority and you want to have fans and you want people in NBL fantasy, in NBL Supercoach, injury news has to be a top priority and team lists have to be a top priority, and you need to get that in time, and you need to be able to have that time then to be able to update your teams. And so regulations and rules about trades and stuff with double game weeks maybe also could be looked at. If you get an injured player, say like Doolittle gets injured on a double game week, you should be able to maybe lose the points for one and then get a free trade to trade him in and out, or crazy stuff like that, but that's a part of the game. But it all comes down to knowing if a player is going to start or not, which you just don't get. So anyway, that's my
100%.
little... I took a rant from you, Josh. Sorry.
I know. I love it. It's good. Takes the pressure off me. I'm not having to bloody, deliver these bone-crushing rants every now and then. But NBL, though, listen up right now. All right? At the end of the day, if you do need a platform and people to cover the injury news, to upload onto your website or to our website, hit us up. Give us the contacts. We've got a lot of contacts ourselves, but give us the chance, because at the end of the day, this is something that is really hurting your league, to be honest with you. Not only for Supercoach, but betting companies, everything like that. It is an absolute nuisance, to be honest with you, not knowing who is going to play until half an hour before the games. And even sometimes the players are listed and they're sitting down the end of the bench with bloody earrings on. That was a thing there in 2023, I think it was. It was the earring check. Is he playing? Well, he's got earrings and he's not playing. LaMelo Ball was rocking up with earrings when he wasn't playing. So I don't know. At the end of the day, it's going to be interesting as well. Curdy, we will answer that question on our Beyond the Buzzer show, so make sure you listen to that question as well. We're touching on that a little bit as well with Bryce Cotton, so we'll answer all that very shortly. Couple more here quickly. Crafty Fat Boy, I am old, and this season is almost as exciting as the 1993 and 2000 season. I am not that old to know those seasons, but I have looked back in history. There were some pretty incredible people. But yeah, that will wrap up today's episode anyways. A couple of little general chit-chats there. Just want to give a massive shout out to everyone in the chat, obviously, on YouTube and Instagram for joining us. As always, it is a lot of fun, obviously, having you guys engage with us, and obviously having a bit of fun as well on your Monday evening. Start of the working week. Everyone loves talking about Supercoach and NBL basketball, so it is our pleasure doing it with all you guys. Now, this will sign us off, Jez. Obviously, we had a pretty good and interesting week. Best of luck this week in your NBL Supercoach adventures. And always, though, make sure you go and check us out on social media, on Instagram and Facebook at The Basketball Fix Podcast. Check us out on our website, www.thebasketballfix.com. We have a fan zone section there. We'd love to see as many of you people in the chat right now on YouTube, on the fan zone, commenting on NBL Supercoach stuff, pumping all of your NBL Supercoach stuff on there as well, and having a lot of fun over there at the NBL.
Anybody wants to write an article about Supercoach, go for it. Create a post in your login. Do it.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously, at the end of the day as well, chucking your teams on there, everything like that, where we can react and have a bit of banter as well. It makes it a really fun environment over there. But until next time, we will catch you next week, the same time, same place. Everything will be the same, just obviously different scores and a bit more banter. But until next time, we hope you've got your basketball fix.
Turnover at halfway. Clock at 10. Adams the off balance. Oh!